récupère avec Saka qui va frapper. Saka! Oh là là! Le chef-d'œuvre! Le masterpiece! Bukayo Saka! Le joyau de la couronne! Le joyau d'Arsenal! La pépite de l'Emirates Stadium répond toujours présent! Année après année, saison après saison, le Big Boss, c'est lui! Frappe Saka! Oh là là! Oh là là! Oh là là! Le Big Boss! Oh là là! La pépite! Oh là là! La pépite! Oh là là! Le Big Boss! Le masterpiece! Big Boss! Oh là là! Big Boss! Saka!
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, goodly evening and badly evening to you.
Yes. Can it be a goodly evening and a badly evening at the same time? Schrodinger's evening.
Yes.
That's what we're experiencing right now.
We are.
What's in the box? Jurrien Timber's knee.
What's in the box? Oh, man. I mean, just at the time of recording, as we've started recording a few minutes before, we've come to understand that the injury suffered by Jurrien Timber is an ACL injury, which is probably going to keep him out for the season, which is unbelievably sickening for us as fans, for the team, and for him as a player. To suffer an injury like that on your debut is just... It's cruel, really, isn't it?
Oh, unbelievably cruel, unbelievably unlucky. I should do the responsible thing and say that you're absolutely bang on that the early tests have suggested something, an anterior cruciate ligament injury, but there are more tests ongoing. So we don't at this stage know the full extent of the damage and if, I don't know, other areas of the knee may be damaged. But it's bad news. It looks bad, and it looks like a significant absence.
Yeah.
A real blow. Do you know what? My thoughts really are with him.
Yes.
I just think you move country to come to Arsenal. It's the move you wanted this summer. It's a dream for you to come and play in the Premier League. You hit the ground running. You're one of the outstanding players in pre-season, and then to have it all whisked away from you in your Premier League debut, he must be absolutely gutted. Poor guy. Yeah,
because he does face now a long period of recuperation and rehabilitation and all the rest. And, I think things are much more advanced when it comes to ACL injuries now than they used to be. Nevertheless, we have seen those injuries impact players and have an effect on them down the line. So, that's just me fearing the worst for him, but you're right. It's absolutely terrible for him, and just so unfortunate because last week we were doing the season previews and writing about the squad and the big season preview, and you're thinking about the defensive roster that we had, and I think I said something like I don't think I can remember an Arsenal squad with the kind of defensive quality and depth that we have going into this season. And after one game, we're losing somebody for, basically the rest of this campaign. And it's really, really unfortunate, really sad for him.
I mean, really sad for him, really sad for us, really sad for Mikel Arteta, I imagine, who has been pretty effusive in his praise of the player. Arsenal spent a lot of money to bring him here for this season, and he's not going to be available for some time. And that's a tremendous blow. The timing of it just feels so cruel.
Yeah.
Like I say, you can't be anything else but gutted. And I have to be honest, this was a player who, from the minute we were interested in him, I was so excited about seeing what he could do in the Premier League. And I think some of that excitement has been justified by what we have seen of him. He's just looked such a natural in this team. It's a real shame, and he solved so many problems for Arsenal. He was playing left back the other day. He's very adept at right back. He's very adept at centre half. I have no doubt he was going to play 40 games, plenty of football this season. And now there's a gap to be filled. I mean, I guess it may mean opportunity for some others, and doubtless we'll come on to that. But at the moment, just my heart goes out to him. It's really, really sad news.
It is. And look, I know everybody involved. Mikel Arteta afterwards said he went through all the tests at half-time and got the clear from the doctors and the physios and all that. But I don't know if you I did a podcast the week before with Dr. Andrew Mitchell from the University of Bedfordshire. We talked about injuries and rehabilitation. We talked about ACLs in the women's game in particular. We spoke a little bit about, and I just asked him about this because secondary injuries are a thing, and you get one injury and then you overcompensate because of how finely tuned these footballers are. I did ask him, what did you make of the decision to bring him back on? And he said to me, I'll just read a little bit from the email. He said, the mechanism of the injury at the end of the first half looked significant. I immediately said, surely they don't let him play on in the second half, as the game looked comfortable for Arsenal at that point. The doctor and physio would have done the appropriate clinical test at half-time, which I assume he passed. The player wanted to play on and, in inverted commas, ignored any pain or discomfort. In half-time, MRI scans can't be carried out and interpreted, which is what you need to really diagnose these injuries. But he said, as we spoke about on the podcast, it's about limiting risk and knowing when to take the medicine. That's not a cowardly decision. It's a brave one. This is a classic example of a primary injury leading to a secondary injury. And obviously the secondary injury is much worse than maybe the primary injury he picked up. And, we were 2-0 up. We were comfortable. We had most of the ball in the game. I know hindsight is 20/20 and all the rest of it, but maybe it's one of those where they'll wish that they'd taken him off at halftime.
Maybe, because the player's always going to want to play.
That's it,
I mean,
especially on his debut at home.
Exactly, home debut. Probably his agents come over. Probably his family have come over.
Yeah,
maybe they're in the director's box. It's a big occasion for him, and if he thinks he has any chance of playing on, he's going to want to do that. Club have to, take these things out of players' hands at times. It's a completely different example, but I was watching the Spurs game over the weekend, and Christian Romero suffered a knock to the head, clash of heads, and he actually scored about 2 minutes later and then was immediately substituted. He was very unhappy about being substituted. He said, I've just scored. What's wrong with you? But the doctors were concerned about him. And, they put their foot down, you're coming off. I know head injuries are different, but that's how you want what you want to see, really. Player safety is paramount. And, I no blame with me for the player at all. I completely understand why he would have wanted to play on.
Of course, yeah.
Not to steal his thunder, but I've got this back injury, Andrew. I've hurt my back. And I know that's what the fans will really be concerned about right now. And I've come literally straight from a treatment table with physio, and I was talking to him about Timber, and he was saying it's not inconceivable that he had pretty severely damaged his ACL in the first incident and played on via adrenaline or not quite extending, not quite realizing. He said he'd worked with a lacrosse player who did their ACL in game and tried to play on for about 10 minutes before they actually came off.
Yeah.
I was in the ground on Saturday, and they were in the process of bringing the stretcher on, and Timber and the physio were both like, no stretcher. And he walked off the pitch himself. At the time, I felt that was encouraging, now I feel somewhat different about that, but it's just a real shame. And I just hope that we get some surprising good news that maybe the recovery is not going to be quite as bad as we fear. But what is evident is we're not going to be able to call on him for some time at least.
No. And obviously there are going to be some discussions or implications about our defensive lineup and maybe who might stay, who might go, whether we need to do anything else. Perhaps we'll talk about that
Well, we've got a few questions about that.
Yeah, we do rather.
Should we park that a bit for now?
Yeah, we can park it a bit for now. But I mean, I think what's interesting, I don't know if it's interesting, it could be coincidence, but we have seen a spate of ACL injuries in the men's game in the last week or so, haven't we? Where Tyrone Mings did his on Saturday, it looks like. Emi Buendia did his. So that's 2 for Aston Villa. Thibaut Courtois. Didn't Real Madrid, who's the other guy? Is it Militao? Who did his as well. So I don't know what exactly is going on. Maybe it's a consequence of last season's crazy season with players playing into the summer and playing international games and the schedule being all over the place and then coming back. I don't know. You know, you can only guess, but
it's plausible. I mean, maybe pre-season is kind of the time these things like to happen, because one of the issues with ACLs, I think, is like if you ramp up loading quite quickly, you know. So if you are going from sort of 0 to 60 over the period of a few weeks, that would be a risk factor. But the only thing that's sort of contrary to that is that I don't think any of these players these days ever really get to 0. You know, they're always in such good nick. The seasons kind of blur into each other a little bit. So yeah, who knows? To be honest, luck is a significant part of any ACL injury, and it does look like this is just pretty bad luck.
Yeah, again, wishing him the best, and hopefully his recovery is as quick and as uncomplicated as you can get. Yeah, it's kind of a bum note, isn't it, to kick off the podcast after, you know, a good win on the opening weekend of the season, 3 points and all the rest of it. But that is the reality of what we're facing and what Mikel Arteta and his staff have to face now and dealing without him. So let's talk about what the implications of that might be in part 2, where we do have questions about it, and we can come back around to this. So Nottingham Forest came on Saturday to the Emirates. When the game eventually kicked off, it was pretty clear the way they were going to set up. They were going to sit deep. They were going to try and counter. They were going to try and make it difficult for us. You know, when you do play with that low block or whatever you want to call it, it is really difficult to try and break that down. And we've been there, done that many times, not just in the Arteta era, but plenty of times before, teams that come and park the bus. I don't think that's a surprise, right? The way that they set up. So do you think that Mikel Arteta's slightly surprising team selection was made with that in mind, knowing how Forest were going to play? He did mention, you know, his decisions were tactical, but do you think there's anything specific about that setup that Forest came with that made him think, you know, Partey at right back, inverting, etc., was the way to go?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's exactly what happened. And credit to the manager. I mean, that was the likelihood that Forest would play that way. They played that way on the road for the vast majority of last season. But they do have the tools to play a bit of a more adventurous game, and they used some of those tools in the second half. But they really did come and sit very deep. He got it spot on, and I think Arsenal had worked on that shape quite a lot during the week in the build up to the game. I don't know if all the personnel, you know, were exactly the same, but a big part of it, I think, was installing William Saliba as the kind of central fulcrum at the base of the team. And that was what we saw, really. I mean, there were parts of that first half where it felt like almost an inverse Christmas tree formation with him as the star, you know, him as the point at the top of the tree. It was kind of a one-man defence, because even though, you know, Thomas Partey was ostensibly playing right back and Ben White was ostensibly playing centre half, those were not the zones those players operated in most phases of the game.
I mean, it was interesting to see them swap around.
Yeah.
You know, and for Partey to end up central, and, you know, he would drop in at centre half at times, and there were a few moments when Ben White went down the right in the more traditional Ben White way that we know and love. But it was fairly comfortable, I think, for Arsenal as well. There was that early chance for Brennan Johnson, but that was just sort of one of those freak bounces that can catch you out at any point in any game, rather than, being cut apart by scintillating Forest football or anything like that. I suppose you can always look at the defending in situations like that, but, he didn't make the most of that chance. Thankfully, blazed wide. And then it just became Arsenal moving the ball, going from one side to the other side, favouring the right, I thought, because I think obviously with Timber at left back and Havertz playing there and Martinelli, of course, who we know, very well, but the relationships between, let's say, Havertz, Timber and Martinelli aren't quite what Zinchenko, Saka and Martinelli would be like. So there was a sort of, it felt like it was a bit more sluggish over on that side.
I think so. And actually, I think playing Partey at right back, although we think of, White and Saka and Odegaard being this sort of important relationship for us on the right-hand side, I think playing someone like Partey who was going to invert, who was going to drift in field all the time, that was a lot about opening up space for Saka and trying to get him into one-on-one situations. I think it was the Forest home game last season where he ended up coming off, didn't he? Because they couldn't live with him, so they were just kicking him essentially.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It was a different left back on the day, but he was a nightmare for them to deal with. And I thought of, did you see that clip from Zinchenko's interview with Rio Ferdinand where he was speaking about the inverted fullback job?
No, I can't. I just can't watch Rio Ferdinand. I'm sorry. I'm interested in what Zinchenko has to say, but the consequence of that is having to listen to Rio Ferdinand, and sure. I won't do it to myself.
Fair enough. Well, I've got good news for you. I can give you a quick
perfect. You have suffered, so I may benefit. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I watched the full thing. I think it was about 40 minutes, so I have suffered, so that you may benefit. He was talking about the inverted fullback role. And it's actually quite a good fun clip because he's basically showing Ferdinand all the tactical problems it presents. And Rio, let's say, doesn't have all the answers. But he was saying the part of his job is, he goes into the middle of the pitch. And the purpose of that is that obviously it drags the right winger with him. Mm-hmm. And so if he gives Martinelli the ball, his job is done because he's taken the right winger into the centre of the pitch and Martinelli is one-on-one with his defender.
Sure.
And he was basically like, in my career, I've played with people like Leroy Sané, Gabriel Martinelli, Bukayo Saka, Riyad Mahrez. If I get them one-on-one with their defender 10 times in a game, some good stuff's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And then he was saying, obviously, the advantage is if the right winger says, well, I'm not going to go with you, I'm going to stick out on the flank and double up on Martinelli. He was like, now, we've got an overload in the centre. He was like, I can do 2 versus 1 with Thomas Partey or Declan Rice, whoever it is, play past number 10 and we can play through the middle of the pitch. So it was just a really nice, succinct explanation. I was a bit like, don't do this, Zinchenko, just to keep it quiet. But,
yeah.
It was really good. And he talks really, really well, actually. I think he's clearly a really smart guy. He thinks about the game a lot. So watching the Forest game, I was thinking, well, what we're seeing is that, replicated on the opposite flank. It's about if Partey goes in field, we've got Saka one-on-one. If we get in the ball quickly enough, fun stuff's going to happen. And I just thought it was an interesting perspective because a lot of the time we used to say, well, we've got to have a runner outside Saka. We've got to support. We've got to give him, someone on the overlaps, take men away. Well, this is another way of taking markers away, having a right back who goes all the way infield, and then suddenly there's a lot less attention on our star man.
Yeah. Those relationships are going to take some time to develop, and I'm sure we'll talk about Havertz a bit because he was the topic of conversation after the game for a little while. But we did score 2 goals in the first half. Quite, I don't know if it was quite noticeable, but both of them came from corners. They're open play goals, but the passage of play that led to each of them was a corner that Nottingham Forest cleared. So the first one was when Martinelli took his, and then the second one when Saliba won the ball back and gave it to Saka, and he did what he did. And I liked the way that there was an intent to win the ball back as high up the pitch as possible when we did lose it. When it does break down, when you play against teams like Forest who sit deep, the quicker you win it back when they get it, or when your move breaks down, the more chance you have of doing something and opening them up. But I mean, what Martinelli did was kind of extraordinary, wasn't it? He just sort of dribbled his way, did the roulette, little back heel to Eddie, and Eddie did very well, stepped inside and shot past Matt Turner.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned, by the way we won the ball back, because watching the game in the stadium, it was kind of the thing that stood out to me most was how physical our approach was and how athletic we looked. I mean, unfortunately, Timber was a big part of that as well. I really, one of his big attributes is his aggression, I think, and his, willingness to get to his man quickly. But I thought Partey, Rice, Saliba, White, Martinelli were really, tireless in kind of winning it back as early as possible. It kind of led to the goal, and sensational stuff from Martinelli. I mean, that little roulette spin. And I think I've seen some debate about, what did he mean there? Did he mean the pass? The contact with the heel is really firm contact. It looks to me like he is certainly knocking it into that area. Whether it's specific enough to be like, oh, there's Eddie, I better give it to him, I don't know. But I think there's a deliberateness about the move for sure.
I agree, because what he could try and do, if he's trying to get past them, is he would use the sole of his foot, right? He would give it another little roulette, but he didn't. He hit it with the heel. I don't necessarily believe he was trying to play an inch perfect pass for Eddie Nketiah, but that's what it turned out. That's what it turned out to be.
What may have been in his mind, to be frank, he might have seen the white of the penalty area line and thought, right, I'll knock this between these two, run through the middle, and hopefully one of them pulls me down. I think that's as plausible as anything else. But I think, to be honest, it's a bit of a pointless debate. The whole question of did he mean it? Did he not? Because these decisions are not conscious in that way most of the time. A player's just reacting in the moment and playing on pure instinct. It's not like a planned thing, but it did come off beautifully. And fair play to Eddie. He got the shot away, took a nick. No chance for Matt Turner. No chance.
He was close, but couldn't keep it out.
Yeah.
The second one,
no mercy for Matt Turner from Bukayo Saka.
Absolutely zero chance of stopping that.
And I thought he made some good saves on the day.
He did. He did. The one from Declan Rice in the second half.
That's an outstanding save.
It really is a brilliant save. A brilliant save. And look, I didn't want him to have a terrible day. I didn't want Matt Turner to, chuck one in his own net or anything like that. But I wanted the kind of goal that Bukayo Saka scored. I wanted a few of those, to be honest, where you can say, well, there isn't a keeper in the world who's going to save that. And I don't know that there is a keeper in the world who would have saved that shot from Bukayo Saka. He's had by his own standards, a relatively quiet preseason, right? Mm-hmm. Relatively. But when it counts, when it matters, first game of the season, he produces, a contender for goal of the month already, I'm sure. And it's the kind of... People have talked about this, the Arjen Robben thing, where you know what he's going to do, but you can't stop it. And I think we're kind of in that territory now for when it comes to Bukayo Saka, where the defender that he sort of drove past went, oh, fuck. You could almost see him go, oh, geez. I think he tried to pull him back a little bit, but he shrugged him off and applied that kind of finish. Unbelievable. Just sensational goal. Yeah,
I was right behind it. And my reaction was similar to that of Kai Havertz, hand on head in disbelief, And you're right. I think the defender, he has a little tug at him. He kind of hangs a leg out because he knows. Matt Turner knows He's probably seen him do it in training 100 times. But it's a brilliant, brilliant strike. And you make a fair point about pre-season, but one of the things I thought was really interesting about the summer was Saka's finishing in his I think what was his final game of last season for England. He banged in a hat-trick, with some brilliant goals. And this was maybe better than any of those. I mean, just a stupendous strike.
He scored some brilliant goals for Arsenal, but that's got to be, pretty close to the top.
Yeah, it is. There's just a growing conviction about the way he strikes the ball in these scenarios. If you go back and watch his academy goals, he's smashing the ball in from all angles. We saw a bit of it last season. We saw it off his right foot at times, into that near top corner. Saw it against United. But here he's just sort of letting loose. And, what can you say? Sensational goal.
Unbelievable. I love him.
I love him as too, very much.
Yes.
When I feel sad about things like Jurrien Timber's injury, I think about Bukayo Saka, and I feel happier when I think about him.
Let's just take a
moment.
moment.
Try yourself, guys.
Yeah, here, we'll give you a moment. Think of it. See? You're feeling better already. That's how it works. He is just unbelievable. So 2-0 at halftime, and it was comfortable. I think we had 85% possession in the first half. Something like that.
Crazy. And I mentioned the challenges, and I think we did this much better in the first half than the second half. I remember seeing, when I was at half-time, I was in the concourse, seeing Alessio Russo score for England in the World Cup. But also they flashed up the match stats. And it was 80-something% possession for Arsenal. But we committed more fouls than Forest, which I think was sort of illustrative of, the fact that whenever they did have it, either we were taking the ball off them, or if necessary, we would, giving them a free kick, but we weren't allowing them to build anything.
No.
And I think we could have done slightly better at that in the second half. The one thing I would say about the first half is we did score 2 brilliant goals, and they kind of had to be brilliant. It wasn't like there was a hatful of chances for us in the game.
No.
But maybe that is the nature of playing against a deep block. It's hard to come by opportunities, and you are going to rely on your individual quality to get the breakthrough.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, that's the whole point of the way Forest set up, the way they set up. And even at 2-0, they didn't change. They didn't change because, they thought, well, if we get one, then maybe we can have a go in the last 15 minutes. And as it turned out, that shit happened. So we'll come to that. But, it is really difficult to find space and to create chances. You can think about what's a good analog to this. Maybe the Tottenham game last season, if you remember, where they set up in a very, very similar way. And the way we had to score, if you remember, the opening goal was Thomas Partey curling one in from outside the box, because they were sitting so deep. The only space was in front of the box, and the only way you can score is with the kind of precision that Partey showed that day, which is curling one into the top corner. Similarly, Martinelli, that run, that precision of pass, Eddie's turn and shot, and Saka's turn and shot. I mean, that's as precise as you get. So that is the nature of playing against these teams. You don't get a lot of chances. And on another day where you're maybe 1 or 2% off in terms of your finishing or wherever, you're going in at halftime 0-0 and frustrated and maybe a little anxious. Yeah,
that's absolutely right. And instead, we're all feeling pretty good about life at half time, I suspect.
Yeah.
But the second half was a slightly different beast, I thought. I think Arsenal, they had Forest in their grip, and that grip sort of slightly loosened, I think, over that first 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, I mean, we had to make the change, obviously, with Tomiyasu coming on for Timber. I mean, this was sort of my worry at halftime, was that we would be in this lead, which is a relatively comfortable lead, but one that we have lost a few times in our last number of matches, going back across to the end of last season and stuff like that.
The most dangerous scoreline in football.
I know, it's a cliche, but we have made it, quite
it's true for us. It's 100%.
Yeah, very, very true for us. So I was really looking for a bit more in the second half. I think perhaps those relationships that we mentioned in the first half, they take a bit of time. You're not quite as fluent as you might like to be. And in 10 games time, you're both more fluent and you're probably fitter. Much more match fit, if that makes sense. So I think there was perhaps an element of that, those things informing the second half performance. And there were a couple of moments where maybe that third goal could have come. You think about the Declan Rice chance and the save from Matt Turner that we already mentioned. Really, really good save. But if he just gets slightly less of a fingertip on that, it's going inside the post and it's 3-0 and then it's, game over, job is Oxo and all the rest of it, right?
Yeah. There was another Rice shot which bounced towards the top corner.
And that was the one that they scored from. Afterwards, they got a corner. Yeah. I think that's the corner that they scored from. But I mean,
we got a corner, Andrew.
Oh, we got a corner. Of course, that's what I mean. We got a corner, and then they scored. But I mean, is that something that concerns you? Is that sort of tendency to allow teams back into games when they really don't merit the scoreline, if you know what I mean, where you have to, I know it's easier said than done, right? Of course. Score another goal and then make a load of changes and everyone's happy and everyone thinks, the world is brilliant. I know that's easier said than done, but to what extent do you think it might be becoming a bit of a thing? Not just within our own minds, within the minds of the players and the manager and everything else, but also for opposition teams who might find themselves with 20% possession in a game and there's 10 minutes left and they don't quite give up hope because Arsenal haven't strangled them enough.
Yeah, and Mikel Arteta's pretty emphatic about this stuff, isn't he? He says you have to get the third goal to kill the game. I think the problem is if Man City are 2-0 up, do teams feel like they've got a chance? I'm not sure they do. I think there are some teams that can exhibit such an extraordinary degree of control that it can kind of suffocate any hope. I don't think Arsenal are in that place at the moment, especially not off the run of thrown away leads that you alluded to towards the end of last season. And the problem with 2-0 is it just takes one moment and suddenly it's a contest. And there were a couple of warning signs. I think quite early in the second half, Ramsdale made a save that was, I think, offside, but it was a little bit of flicker of hope for Forest.
They had some corners.
They had a few corners at their end in front of their fans. There was a little sort of scrappy spat, I seem to remember, between some of the players, which again sort of fired them up. And you just thought this is a little bit of a wobbly period. Arsenal did make changes. Trossard came on for Eddie, I think, on about 70 minutes or so. And we did go looking for that third goal at times. It would absolutely have killed it. I think what really swung it was the changes they made as well. They brought on the centre forward. Is it Awini?
Yep.
Awini? Yeah, I'm sorry for everyone in Nigeria. I mangled that terribly. But he was a real handful. And then Elanga comes on, completely fresh. And almost the first thing he does is run the length of the pitch from one end to the other to set up a goal.
I mean, it is, yeah. And he's also fresh and fast and ready against a central midfielder playing at right back.
Yes, and we saw the other side of that, didn't we? I mean, Thomas Partey, when we're in possession, when we move up the pitch in that phase of the game, he looks very comfortable, drifting in central areas. When he's forced to go the other way in a 1v1 situation, he looks substantially less comfortable.
Yes. I mean, they did have that they had a penalty claim, I think, the Declan Rice handball thing.
Yes, they were very unhappy about that after the game. I think
it would have been really harsh, really given the way the ball fell and where his arms were. But I do think there's maybe a case to be made for a foul on Kai Havertz in the build up, if you want to call it that, before Elanga takes the ball and just fucking roasts his way down the left wing. Havertz is basically loafed in the head at the corner. And I can see on the video that he does sort of go down, but I don't know if he went down sufficiently well, if that makes sense, to attract the attention of the referee, who would have had to stop it because it's a head injury. I mean, I think it's a foul. I do think it's a foul, but I don't know what the ruling is there, that maybe there's too much distance between, that thing being committed on Havertz. But I just wonder if maybe he could have gone down and held his head more obviously and play would have stopped. But, I also think we could have defended that better.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I remember, do you know what? I remember when they got this corner and it was right in front of me. I was in the North Bank. And I remember thinking, we are very committed here. We had a lot of men in the box. We were chasing that third goal. And I think it was pretty much, I'm trying to think who was back. I think it was just Ben White, really. And I remember thinking, we're really going for this here. And that's potentially a bit dangerous. Even so, I don't think we could have anticipated Forest executing the break quite as well as they did. I think there was a bit of a miscommunication as well, because Declan Rice makes like an 80, 90-yard run back, and as does, I think, Trossard. But I don't think... I think while the intent from the players was good, I don't think there was great clarity about what exactly everyone's job is in terms of stopping that counter. And it just ended up with one guy getting quite a free run with the ball and another guy very much getting across his man to poke it into the near post. Yeah.
I mean, keeper has no chance when it comes from that close. And, it's sharp movement from the striker to get across Ben White there. But it was frustrating and also, a little bit nerve-wracking, because you knew at that point that there was going to be a significant amount of injury time. Not quite as much as I had feared, I have to say. But I did think that there was going to be, at least I thought there'd be might be, because of the injury and everything else, I thought there might be like 8 or 9 minutes. It turns out it was 7. But this is something you've got to factor in as well, isn't it? That you concede a goal in the 82nd minute, but there's still then 15 minutes to play. It's a lot of time for just another one of those moments.
It is, and it's that weird thing where, one wouldn't imagine Arsenal have done a great deal of time wasting in the game, and then suddenly, it all comes back to bite them, because there is this lengthy stoppage for us to try and grab an equaliser. But we had the comfort of Gabriel to bring on, which was needed, I think, for some physicality at the back to help handle their sort of revamped front line.
Yeah.
It was that thing that, they made, I think, they made good changes. I almost sort of thought, why didn't you start those guys? They look much more dangerous. But, it did make it a little bit nervy. And I think we probably were all thinking back to West Ham and Anfield and Southampton and, slightly different games Southampton won, but just those sort of nervous losses of late leads. But fortunately, we held out this time. Yeah,
I don't think they really threatened too much. There was the only one I can really remember. There was a Gibbs White shot, maybe a minute after they actually scored. He fired it over the bar, where it maybe looked a little more dangerous than it was. It was fairly well over, but Ramsdale had a good dive at it anyway. And there were moments maybe where we could have done a bit more ourselves. There were a couple of breaks.
Havertz went up top, didn't he? And he had a couple of sort of runs on the counter where he might have made something of it potentially. Yeah.
Wasn't there a bizarre one where he actually handled the ball?
And, really? I didn't see that.
Yeah, the ball went over the top and he very clearly handled it. But somehow we got a corner because of the way the rules are with regards goal scoring opportunities. I can't remember what they were saying on the TV.
But if he'd scored, it wouldn't have counted, kind of thing?
Something like that. But we get the corner. But if we'd have scored the corner, it would have been a goal, even though he'd handled it. Oh, it's strange. Wow. I don't quite know.
One thing I noticed in the ground, as anyone who was there will have seen, we now have a clock for stoppage time.
I had a question about this.
Never had before. And apparently, because I mentioned it on YouTube and a few people replied in the comments, it's a FIFA rule change that now permits teams to do that.
You see, we had a question on the Discord from Limpar84 who was asking if this was an Arteta instruction, so the crowd know exactly how much injury time has gone, and then they can start whistling and blowing if he goes over that time. But is it a FIFA edict, or is it just each club can decide for themselves if they're going to show how much injury time there has been?
Not sure. Not sure. Just sort of trying to guess what 5 words I could Google to bring me that answer. Don't know. But I gather that we weren't allowed to have it before, and now we are. And it saves me getting my little iPhone out and starting a stopwatch and anxiously looking at it every 5 seconds. So I was grateful for that. And grateful for the 3 points. I mean, it was a strange game, I think, in some ways, because Arsenal were comfortably the better team, and yet we sort of had this nervous end to it. And I think there were lots of things we could have done better. I think we definitely could have created more clear-cut chances. And I think we could have kept up the pressure and the momentum in the second half better than we did. But as I keep saying, it's not about peaking in August. It's about peaking next spring. Yeah,
I mean, it's not unusual for your first game of the season to be imperfect, right? Because pre-season is what it is, and you prepare as well as you can. But once the real competition starts, that's how you get fully up to speed. And like we said, we have these new players, like 3 new players started. One of them playing ostensibly out of position, in Timber playing at left back. I mean, he can very clearly do it to a high level, but it's not really his position. And, the players that they were replacing, Saka and Zinchenko, were very fundamental to how well we played last season. So I think there's...
No Gabriel Jesus as well.
No Gabriel Jesus. No Gabriel as well. He started 73 consecutive Premier League games and had to sit this one out from the start, which, is...
What did you make of that?
I mean, I was surprised, I have to say. I was surprised. I was wondering how much different we would be against Nottingham Forest if it had been, the usual back 4, or the back 4 that we would have expected with White, Saliba, Gabriel, Timber. Was it a case of trying to get Havertz onto the pitch in a way?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Or Eddie onto the pitch. An extra
Eddie, yeah. Well, I mean, he did speak.
Player,
he did speak. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's about the fact that he expected Forest to sit deep, and if we are going to overload somewhere, let's put another attacking or creative player or goal scorer on the pitch. And he spoke very effusively about the way Eddie Nketiah trained during the week. I mean, he must have been fucking mad for it. How do you train that hard?
A beast, he described him as. Yeah, he said something to the effect of, you're an idiot if you don't pick me, was kind of the way Eddie trained. I think Mikel Arteta, over the course of his time as Arsenal manager, has probably said more nice things about Eddie Nketiah than he has about any other player.
I think that could be true. But look, it's a start and it's a goal, and he scores when he starts. I'm not saying he scores every time he starts, but when he scores, he's a starter.
Yeah.
So, look, it's a good problem to have in the absence of Jesus and maybe some other players who, have played well. Trossard, for example, must be wondering why he can't get a start.
Yeah, had a good cameo as well, I thought, Trossard.
Yeah, he did.
Some good moments.
He did. But look, the main thing is 3 points, right? And I think it's much easier to pick the bones out of a performance when you've got 3 points on the table. And you can really assess how you're going to make things better, how you're going to improve for the next game. Whatever criticisms or analysis there is, once you've got that win under your belt, I think you just go from there. I mean, you remember last season we started with a 2-0 win away at Crystal Palace, but it was 1-0 for a long time, wasn't it? And the second goal came very, very late, and I'm not saying it added a bit of gloss to the scoreline, but that wasn't necessarily a completely comfortable win on the opening day either.
Yeah, they had chances as well.
Yeah.
I was there that night. I remember very well they had chances. I think the win is paramount. We're going to be improving, hopefully, and settling players in and trying new things over the next few months. But you've got to keep the league, and particularly Man City, demand that you keep picking up results while you go through that process. The Gabriel one, I think I am interested by that. I know Arteta or the club have said tactical reasons. I do wonder if something might emerge about a physical problem or something, just because I look at that number 73, it's consecutive starts, and I think I'm all for trying new things, but it's a big step to take him out. And he's been such a pivotal building block for us. Who knows? Maybe he'll be back in on Monday, and that's just going to be the way it is this season. I think variety, we're going to have to get used to it and having different game plans. I was struck watching this weekend's football. Last season, Arsenal fielding Zinchenko as a kind of inverted fullback, or Ben White doing similar things at time, was pretty innovative, pretty out there. Only really City were doing it. I must have seen half a dozen teams doing it over the course of the weekend. Spurs had a couple of inverted fullbacks. Liverpool have got Trent Alexander-Arnold doing that job now. It doesn't take long for the league to catch on, and the game is evolving all the time. And I guess Arteta, he wants to be at the forefront of that, and he wants to be continually innovating so that the opposition are playing catch up.
Yeah, I mean, that's really true. Things that are innovative one season are the norm the next, and you've got to think of new ways. And I think Arteta said something along those lines after the game, didn't he, about how it's his job to, I can't remember, fool the opposition or something like that, or to keep people thinking. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along those lines. So, everybody knows if Zinchenko's going to play, they're going to know what it is that, that he's going to do. I'm just seeing if I can find that quote. Yeah, it's my job to create bigger problems for the opponents than the ones that they are creating us. We might see some surprising team selections, but if it results in 3 points, I think we'll take that. I mean, just before we go into the break, I did see people sort of say, oh, this is, the performance wasn't great. This is Arteta going a bit galaxy brain, blah, blah, blah. I mean, isn't that also kind of what people have wanted? To have that bit more variety, to be a bit more unpredictable, to be not the thing that everybody expects us to be, that there are maybe going to be a few teething problems with that as we implement those different kind of formations or systems or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, as I say, it could be as simple as that as to why Gabriel's rotated out. It's a way of creating a different impetus to the team, and meaning that opposition can't prepare for us as well as they could last season. I mean, basically, if you were playing Arsenal last season, broadly, you knew who was going to play and you knew what they were going to do. And I think any uncertainty we can create around that is probably going to benefit us, as long as we win the games along the way. And I think Arteta, obviously, he's lost a player today, but I think he feels much more confident in his squad and the broader, wider group. So I think we might have to get used to being surprised by some of his selections. Yeah.
Let's see what he does. The season is long and it's all ahead of us, basically. So we'll see what happens next. Okay, we will take a little break here. We'll come back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer questions that you sent to us on Twitter at Gunnerblog and at Arseblog. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. And I did mention a podcast that we did exclusively for our Patreon members. I just think in the light of this Timber injury, it's a conversation that people might like to hear. So I'll put a link to it in the show notes. You don't have to be a Patreon member to listen. It's free to air, so to speak. So if you want to have a listen to me speaking to Dr. Andrew Mitchell, you can do that. Just follow the link in the show notes. Of course, if you did want to sign up to Patreon and support everything that we do at Arseblog, it's patreon.com/Arseblog. Right. Do you want to go back in on the Timber thing, seeing as we've mentioned it?
Have you got a question?
I have a question here from Noeling. And just to sort of give us a kickoff point, I suppose, and I do want to ask you what you think the implications of this might be. Noling says, hi guys, who's your starting left back for the next game if both Zinchenko and Timber aren't available? And I think what was something we didn't really mention in the first part of the show was Kieran Tierney was not in the squad. Mm-hmm. And I know people will have their own view on Tierney as a player, and a lot of people love him, and I get it completely. As far as we can tell, the pecking order for Mikel Arteta when it comes to left back, there are 4 players now ahead of Kieran Tierney. In Timber, Tomiyasu, Zinchenko, and even Kiwior at times. So where do you think that leaves Tierney? And, again, what do you think Arsenal might want to do in reaction to the Timber injury? Because even though he started his career here on the left, he was signed primarily to, be cover, competition, whatever you want to call it, on the right, because he can play at centre half on the right. He can play right back as well. And I think everybody was pretty happy that in the right back position, we had sufficient cover and depth. When you've got White, Tomiyasu, Timber, you're really well covered in that position. And of course, you still have Tomiyasu, and hopefully he can stay fit. So about 72 questions there in one, James. So off you go.
Well, here's the funny thing, right? Like, the thing about Jurrien Timber's injury is that we signed a player like Jurrien Timber to help us cope with an injury like the one Jurrien Timber has just suffered. We're kind of just sort of back where we started in some respects. I was thinking about it before the show, and I was like, I'm sure people are going to ask about Kieran Tierney. But personally, I don't think this changes anything for Kieran Tierney.
I agree.
I just think that, as you say, at left back, Zinchenko to come back, Tomiyasu came on the other day, Kiwior, who's played there in pre-season and at the end of last season. I think that ultimately Tierney is still not the type of player that Mikel Arteta wants at left back, and Timber's injury does not change that. So I think his future still lies elsewhere. And I saw there was a story in the Telegraph today about, Newcastle still looking for a left back. They'd like to do a loan. Kieran Tierney's among their targets. I don't think I can see Arsenal doing a loan to Newcastle unless there's, a big option or obligation attached to that loan.
Nor should they, given the...
That's what I mean.
Given the wealth of Newcastle, and I know there might be FFP implications, but come on. They're owned by... They're the richest football club on the planet, and you're not going to take a player on loan, even if he is surplus to requirements. Why should we help you without you at least, giving us a load of money, which we could then use, to offset the extra strength that Newcastle would have?
Yeah, I mean... Newcastle seem to be taking this bizarre stance of trying to observe the financial fair play rules, which in a league where Chelsea exist, I don't really understand the point.
It's fucking crazy.
But so on the left back side, I don't think this really changes very much. I think it's a blow, and I think Timber would have started a lot of games in that position. I really do. At the right back side, I think we're definitely weaker because we've got Ben White in as right back. We've got Tomiyasu behind that, but Tomiyasu's had a lot of injury problems of his own. Also, if we were to lose a centre half, Gabriel or Saliba, we wouldn't be able to put Timber in there, so we'd probably be moving White, and then you're kind of down a right back. But we did just play Thomas Partey at right back against Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not fully sold on it. I think it worked fine. But
before you go on, I just will, in order to squeeze in a question, Johnny Comer said, TP at inverted right back, does it work? Are we missing out on his qualities in CM? And is it worth it if Gabriel's on the bench to accommodate it? I don't think so, says Johnny.
I sort of agree with that. I mean, I think, certain games, certain games, I think it's probably fine. And maybe a game against Nottingham Forest at home, it is fine. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. I'm just, maybe I need to see it more. Maybe it needs to work better against a bigger team or something. I'm just not, personally, it's not to my taste. Which, of course, is just...
The thing is, I don't think it's that different from putting Zinchenko left back. Zinchenko gets run on the outside. Zinchenko doesn't look comfortable going backwards. But in games where you dominate the ball, it can do you more good than harm.
Sure.
And I think, against an opponent like Forest, and Arteta got it spot on in terms of what their approach would be, you can get away with it. But get away with it is probably the phrase, right?
Yeah.
I don't think in the biggest games it's something you want to have to do.
Yeah, like I know we can look at situations like this in a sort of glass half empty kind of way, but Saliba is back and playing well, but he said he's not 100% yet. But if you get the back injury and then if you get another double whammy injury on the right side of your defence, what are you doing? Is it Rob Holding time again? And with all due respect to Rob, that's something we should have learned from. Yeah,
and I think he probably would quite like to go as well. So
Cedric Remontada. Is that what we're looking at?
I don't think Rob Holding's going to be swung by, do you want to stay in case 4 people get injured?
No.
I think if he gets a move, if someone comes in, he'll still go. But I have to say, and this is all breaking news, the Timber thing, and I have not had any conversations around it yet. I don't know the plans, but my gut says that Arsenal won't buy a defender. I think they will stick with what they've got.
Do you think they might dip into the loan market, perhaps, or
maybe that would make sense, wouldn't it? But their squad is huge. So, and like I say, I think in a weird way, we bought this player so that we could cope with a situation like this. We do still have depth. We do still have 2 good right backs. We've got at least a couple of left backs. So I think we probably still have enough. I just think it's more his quality. Honestly, I just think he's better than a lot of our other options. Well, I think he would have made us a better team this season.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think they'll do anything? It's hard because you've bought this player on a 5-year contract.
Well, that's it. Yeah, you're not going to go out and buy another player like that. And I think
he has got a twin brother. If we're interested,
I do wonder. Maybe is there scope for somebody like Rule Walters to provide some cover, or at least get some playing time in some of the cup games or something like
cups,
that?
Maybe, yeah.
Like I saw him in. Did he play in the Man United game? No.
Not sure. Didn't watch that one, so not sure.
I can't quite remember what game I saw him in, but I was impressed by his size and physique. And he's obviously fairly highly rated, but how ready he is another question. I don't know. I mean, I guess it might depend on how they view both Zinchenko and Tomiyasu.
Well, that's the worry, right? Because neither of those players are, immune from injury.
I think Tomiyasu is more than good enough if he stays fit, to cover and rotate with Ben White at right back. Absolutely. I think
it's a big if, isn't it? If he stays fit.
It is a big if. And the reality of Zinchenko is, he misses.
Sometimes you get him, sometimes you don't.
Sometimes maybe fit, sometimes maybe, he is definitely going to miss chunks of the season, Zinchenko. There's no two ways about it. You look at his injury record, go on Transfermarkt. He's one of the only players, I think, who's got like a 3-page injury list. So you have to take that into account. I could be over-egging it. Maybe it's 2, but it's all like calf injury, muscle injury, whatever. But that's just who he is, and that that's been present throughout his career. So you've got to expect a certain amount of absence from Zinchenko. So I think that might go into their thinking. I do wonder if maybe towards the end of the window, if they can get some players out and if there's room in the squad, somebody's on the loan market or there's somebody out there who's slightly experienced cover, wouldn't surprise me.
Well, that's the thing. Right now, we've still got a lot of defenders on the books. Even Cedric is still there. And so my instinct is that they won't do it unless they pick up more injuries. By the way, on the defence, a complete wildcard option at centre-half, you do have Declan Rice as well, who has played at centre-half in his career. And I can see games where you might think, yeah, stick him in and he can do that ball-playing role from the back. So I do think we've got the numbers. I just think we've lost a
really good player.
An excellent player.
Yeah.
That's the shame of it.
Yeah. Whatever you do is going to be a slight compromise, but there you go.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of a related question in some respects. Jack Abela on Twitter said, "I can't call it X, Andrew. It's too
it's
mad."
Twitter.
Okay. Evening. How detrimental do you think it will be to the season if we can't move on players and have a bloated squad? We saw how connected the small group were last year. Do we need to retain that feeling within the squad?
I mean, you want the right number of players around. You don't want players who are in training and hanging around knowing that they're never going to play and they're not going to play any minutes. I thought it was really quite interesting on, was it Friday maybe? There was a picture, I think it was Cedric, who posted a picture of some players who come in for afternoon training rather than training in the morning with the group.
Right.
And there was Balogun.
The tension, basically.
Yeah. Well, there was Balogun, there was Cedric, there was Albert Samuel Lokonga, I think Nuno Tavares. Maybe there was another one as well. I don't quite know.
How mad is that? We just had a 10-minute conversation about left back and none of us even said Nuno Tavares. I genuinely forget these players play for us.
Out of sight, out of mind kind of thing.
Yeah.
But obviously that was a conscious decision because, you have to manage that situation. So it's not like you're going to exclude them all week long. But I would say on the Friday session, when you're preparing for the game and when you want to work with the players who are going to be in the squad, maybe these guys, you come in the afternoon and do whatever training you do. Or maybe they're all injured. I don't know. Maybe they're all just carrying an injury and they're just doing fitness work. I don't know what it is. But I don't think that's necessarily sustainable.
Andrew, I'm looking at our squad page on Arsenal.com now.
Yeah, it's four pages long.
Mad.
Yeah.
I think it's got 32 players in it.
Plus goalkeepers.
No, that's including the keepers.
That's including.
I mean, we're about to announce David Raya at some point. That will be the 5th goalkeeper in the senior squad. You can't have too many. Can we play them all? That would help.
5.
Still stand on the line.
Did they get rid of one from the... They did. They took one out.
Did they?
Oh, Matt Turner, obviously. Yeah, of course.
Matt Turner, right. Yeah, we were going to go for 6,
We did have 5 goalkeepers, and now we've got, Ramsdale, Runerson, Karl Hein, and Arthur Okonkwo listed. Yeah, it is. It's too big. They've got to get moving, but I do think it is going to be
11 defenders.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these guys have got to go. In terms of how disruptive it can be, it can get bad. I mean, we all remember the season where we couldn't register. Who was that guy who wore number 10? I forget his name now. And Socrates, of course.
Yeah.
And, that was tricky politically. And there was, I don't know if anyone remembers that season, but, there were things that came out of the dressing room, which is what happens when you've got people on the outside looking in and they're unhappy and they're not getting a chance to play. It can, a bit of a rot can set in.
Yes.
If you've got people who aren't included.
One bad apple and all the rest of it,
Yeah, but you know what?
It's human nature,
they're
isn't
bad
it?
apples. It's just that they're being made to train on their own in the afternoons or whatever it is, It's not healthy. It's not good.
No, I think they really need to work hard on this. But, I think the market sort of not sorts this out, but I think in the last couple of weeks of the window, things really start to move. And there's a lot of money sloshing around.
Sorry, Andrew, to cut across, but you know what's really interesting? I urge you to go on the Arsenal first team players page.
I'm there.
because they recently had their club photo shoot, right? The media day. We all saw the pictures of Win the dog on her throne.
We sure did.
But so everyone's got brand new, updated profile pictures.
Uh-huh.
Well, and not everyone has.
Oh, I'm looking now. Nuno.
So some players they've just not really bothered with. So Okonkwo, Nuno, Sambi, Pepe, and Balogun are still on last season's profile picture.
Yeah.
So they didn't even have a space for them in the photo shoot.
This is like the website version of the training bibs.
Kind of. I mean, that tells a story, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. Like Pepe hasn't even come back. Like I assume
Runerson's done well to get a photo, hasn't he, for this year?
He has, to be fair. But I mean, the Pepe situation, right?
Where is Nicola Pepe?
Well, he's training and he's on his own and he's training on his own.
Well, where?
I don't know. In his garden? I don't know. Like, I don't know if he's in England, I presume. But like something like that. How does that happen? Like, what is the process for that situation to develop? Because Nuno is back and Sambi is back and Runerson is back. And, you know, I know that Pepe wasn't necessarily a player to Arteta's tastes, but nor do I think he was like some kind of bad guy or anything like that, you know? This kind of situation must be done with a discussion between the player and the club, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm saying where's Pepe? I don't think they're saying that at London Colney. I don't think they're going, is he going to turn up? They must have had a chat with him, his agent. You know, it must all be agreed upon. But it's unusual, isn't it?
It is. Is it
genuinely? Maybe they haven't got enough cubicles in London Colney.
But I mean, is it counterproductive when he's a player that you probably want to sell? And I know his stock is low and everything, but he's not useless, you know? So does excluding him sort of make it more difficult for you to try and move him on and find another club or whatever it might be? Or is he the classic example of what Edu talked about last summer when he said, you know, if a guy is over 26, he's on a big wage and he's not performing, you've got no chance of selling them? Is that just something Arsenal have said, well, yeah, he ticks all those boxes, you know, at some point we will make an agreement and terminate his contract and, you know, he can fly free and end up somewhere else?
Well, that's the way it feels like it's headed, doesn't it? Is it counterproductive? I really don't know. It's really hard to say, isn't it? I mean, what harm does it have to have Pepe around the training ground?
No, yeah, exactly.
Does it increase his value? I'm not sure. Maybe they just think, well, look, he's on a very healthy salary here. We want to make it very clear to him that he needs to go. You know, the door is shut. But
I mean, that's a 2-second conversation that you have between manager and player or sporting director and player and agent. You say, look, it's done here. Let's all find a way through this. And maybe this is their way through it.
Maybe he doesn't want to come back. I honestly don't know. I honestly
don't know.
don't know.
It's a weird one.
It is a weird one. To come back to the original question, this squad is way too big. It's good that Timber got injured. We can't carry another body. I think, we've got to shift some of these players, haven't we? How many times have we said that over the last few years?
Yeah. It's pressing now, isn't it? Verging on urgent.
Yes, I mean, you know, we're into the final fortnight or so of the window. We really don't want half a dozen guys turning up for afternoon training, not even registered for a game for 4 months. That will not be healthy. That's
the thing. You have to register your squad. When is the deadline for squad registration? Is it after the window closes, I guess?
Yeah, I presume it's around the time of the transfer deadline.
Yeah. So you've got to submit your 25-man squad, and that's it, 25 men. And as you say, there's 30-odd right now. So, you know, at least 5 or 6 need to go pretty much fucking straight away or as soon as possible. So let's hope they can do that. Let me ask you this one because you were there. Mm-hmm. Tola on the Discord said, "Goodly morning, gents. At the Emirates on Saturday, although it was a goodly afternoon, sun shining, 3 points, cracking goals, etc. I felt the atmosphere might have been a notch subdued in comparison to pretty much any game last season. Did you feel the same thing, whether at the game, James, or watching on TV, Andrew? And if you did, what do you think this might be down to? Some noticed the Ashburton Army's numbers have dropped. There was a chance the atmosphere was affected by the delay to kick-off, but part of me thinks it's down to the new expectancy from us Arsenal fans. It's the first season for at least a decade, I'd say, where we're fully expecting a title challenge, and I think the enjoy the ride mentality of most of last season may have changed. Interested to hear your thoughts."
I heard something, people saying about the atmosphere. To be honest, I didn't necessarily notice that there wasn't much atmosphere. I think it was a game in the second half that did drift a bit, and I think that probably played into it. There were some problems getting into the game and a delayed kickoff.
I think that was definitely a factor.
That would dampen spirits, right? If you were stuck outside the ground.
Were you caught up in that, or
very much so? Yeah, because I was quite late getting to the game, so I was on the no, it's probably not the concourse, isn't it? The sort of
the outsidey bit.
The outside.
That's the
bit.
technical
I was on the outsidey bit, and it was super, super busy. From what I understand, there was a technical fault with the ticketing system, and consequently, it was, we were late getting in and it was delayed kickoff. Inevitably, that impacted the atmosphere, I think, and people were a bit grumpy about the delay, about having to stand around in quite busy conditions, less time to be inside, getting a beer or whatever. And it's 12:30 kickoff, and 12:30 kickoffs are, or 1 p.m. kickoffs that transpired, I think, are just a little bit more sedate. I did see that the Ashburton Army allocation in the clock end was a bit smaller than we were used to seeing last season. Mm-hmm. So maybe at the clock end that might have made a difference in terms of atmosphere. But I have to be honest, in the North Bank, I didn't hugely notice a massive difference. But I was very focused on the game, so I may not be the best judge.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell from television sometimes, but I think as all the circumstances you mentioned, plus the fact that the last part of the game was nervy.
Yes.
I think played a part in how maybe people feel about the overall experience as well. Like if you win 2-0 and everyone goes out and you're not scared for 15 minutes, you just go, that was grand. Nice, comfortable start to the season. 3 points. Lovely. Sunny Saturday, But I also think that there are going to be games where perhaps the atmosphere is going to be, because of the opposition, is going to be slightly more subdued than it might be against others, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I think that's true. What do you think of this point? Somebody suggested the temperamental Gooners on Twitter said, it felt like the reaction to the Forest performance, if not the result, was a bit flat. Is this because of our comparisons to City and how they perform? Friday away at Burnley looked easy for them, and they will probably dismantle Forest when they play them at home.
Yeah, maybe so. And I think there's probably the I don't think it'd be look, you can't take anything for granted. Forest beat us at the end of last season. The Premier League is difficult. But I think when you're 2-0 up at halftime, you're at home, sun is shining, you really want to step on their necks. And I think, we are capable of it. I think we're capable of playing better football, right? We talked about the performance in the second half, lacking a bit of intensity, whatever it might be. I think there might be a comparison with City, but also the sense that maybe we didn't do ourselves justice on the day as well. So I think people will be happy with 3 points, but the performance, if it's a school report, it's probably fine, can do better. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you watch any of City?
No.
Pretty disheartening, actually, 3 minutes in when Haaland, with practically his first touch, just smashes the ball into the net.
Will someone please, just this season, just one player in the Premier League, just mark him, please.
Yeah.
Just try it. It might catch on. It might become the new inverted fullback thing. Hey, if we mark this guy, yeah.
I have to say, I didn't think you were going to say Mark then. I thought it was going to be something more violent.
It's early season. We've got a lot of time to get into the weeds of that.
I liked this from Northern Gunners. Big Psy G87 said, will the narrative change from if Saka did it to if Arteta did it? Seeing as old boy Roy can get into it and it's just laughed at, but if our Lego head Gaffer did it, Richard Keys would have exploded with rage and they'd have an hour documentary on Sky about it.
I mean,
did you see this, Roy Hodgson?
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, that was funny. I suppose the difference is that, Roy Hodgson is, however old he is, 76 years of age.
Yeah. Squaring
up to the Sunderland.
Professional athlete.
Yeah, exactly.
I admire him for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was great. Like, you'd see that moment where he's going, you little, okay, And of course, it would have been different if Arteta had done it because, he is younger and all the rest of it. But I do take the point. I think, there are elements of double standards about the way that Mikel Arteta's behaviour on the sideline is under the spotlight in comparison to some other managers who do the same or worse and have done the same or worse. But, that's what we're getting into. Did you see, I saw this after the game. We had, must have been a corner, whether we had a corner or Forest had a corner. And from the TV footage, someone had taken a screenshot and it was Arteta and Nicholas Jover, both of them standing at the front of the technical area. And the new rule says that only one person at a time can be at the front of the technical area. Somebody else can be at the back of the technical area or behind the person who's at the front of the area. So the two of them are, having their conversations as they do when there's a set piece going on. And someone had screenshotted it and copied in, tagged in the Premier League and the PGMOL. And so, I thought this wasn't allowed. I mean, is this where we're going with football? People are going to be fucking Twitter snitches with screenshots all season long. For what? What do you do? What are people doing?
We found Richard Keys' burner account. So hang on, they're allowed to stand behind each other.
Yeah,
only a little managerial conga.
Sort of human caterpillar, but not connected. One person is allowed at the front and one person is allowed further back in the penalty or in the technical area, but both people aren't allowed in the front of the technical area at one time. So manager and assistant manager and coach, whoever it might be.
I'm glad the rules are focusing on the important stuff.
They are, aren't they? I mean, yeah, I don't want to talk about the rules. I mean, some of the yellow card stuff is kind of a bit mad to me. It does seem mad. Maybe it'll stop players waving an imaginary card, but I just don't really understand why there's such outrage about that. If I'm bombing through on goal and some fucking big bastard hacks me down from behind and I turn around and go, what the fuck, are you going to book him for that or what? I get a yellow card as well as the guy who committed the violent assault on my ankles. It just doesn't seem right. I feel like they need sin bins for this kind of stuff because reducing teams to 10 men for nonsense like that is, I don't think it's good for the game. But anyway, I said I didn't want to talk about the rules. So let me ask you about this. John Larkin on Discord says, what were your thoughts on Havertz's performance on Saturday? The reaction online ranged from really good to really poor. There's a surprise. Because of how much we've been used to seeing Xhaka perform that role, will it take fans more time to warm to Havertz because of how different it will be?
Definitely. I think it will. I thought he did okay. Are you allowed to say that on the internet?
Yeah.
I didn't think he was great. I didn't think he was terrible. Thought he was kind of fine. I liked what he did off the ball in some respects more than what he did on it.
Yes, I agree with that. I think his movement off the ball is really, really smart. And I think on the ball he could be probably more decisive.
Yeah, I think he did some interesting stuff positionally. He did the Xhaka thing of sometimes being the overlap, more so in the first half, being on the outside. I think he worked hard defensively. I think he seems up for that aspect of it, which, doesn't necessarily tally with maybe the idea of the player as we've inherited it. I do worry about him, though, just because I just think there's massive scrutiny. Like, I am optimistic about what he can contribute, but I do feel a little bit like he's on the back foot already with some people. And I think he's got an uphill battle to win people around.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Chelsea thing is obviously part of it, right?
Yeah, and the price tag. It's a big price tag.
It's looking less big
by the day
as fucking shit goes on. Considering what's going on. I mean, I know it's one club absolutely skewing the market in a fucking absurd way, but yeah, no, I think you're right. He does have plenty to prove. I think he's a guy who maybe as well, after a couple of years where he hasn't been as productive as he has been in his career, maybe just needs time to build momentum and confidence. And from the way Mikel Arteta talks about him, I think he's going to give him that time and give him those opportunities. So I do hope he can, be a bit of a slow burn, and start to integrate properly and deliver and contribute with end product. I really hope he can. Like you, I thought he was okay. I think he's a very smart mover off the ball. I just think sometimes on the ball, there's just a bit of a delay, but that might come when he gets to know his teammates a bit better and how to give them what they want, at the right time.
Yeah.
That's another aspect of it. So.
For them to learn that about him as well. What about this one? Arsene Wrangler said, during Man City and Forest, I started to see in moments the horseshoe of death. Is this new players bedding in early season, or has Arteta started to overthink? I don't want to see this slow build-up we've seen in the past.
I mean, you're playing against a team who've got 11 men behind the ball at all times, and very often they've got those 11 men in the final, in their defensive third, in 1/3 of the pitch. And the reality of that is that you're going to play the ball from side to side to try and open them up a bit and try and move them around. That is just how you have to play against them. Maybe it was a bit slow at times. Maybe we didn't hit the big switch a few times when we could have. That might be part of it, where maybe...
Match of the Day said that. Did you watch their analysis?
I didn't, no.
Michael Richards was basically saying he felt, if you want to get Martinelli or Saka one-on-one, you need to hit that big switch. You need to hit them earlier. And Arsenal, I think, to be honest, Arsenal had so many players in that central midfield area with Partey, with Havertz, with Rice. Maybe it congested it a little bit. So we started playing the short pass to the available man 5 yards away rather than being a bit more expansive. I think that would be a fair criticism.
Yeah. So, look, I don't worry about it after one game. I think we can't read too much into one game. Things happen over the course of a season. Patterns develop over the course of a season. And, if we see this routinely and we're lacking the kind of incisive passing we've seen. But then again, I can remember like 3 or 4 really good Martin Odegaard passes in this game. Mm-hmm. We talked about precision of finishing, but also you need precision in those passes as well. There were a couple where Ben White was maybe just a little bit too long, sending them over the top for Saka. Things like that where, your perception of what happened is altered by, where you're receiving the ball and the players who are getting on the end of some of those passes. There was sufficient movement and sufficient precision in our play, despite some of the slow passing, for us to score 2 very, very good goals in the first half. And it's not easy to score against teams that sit that deep. So early season, first game, not 100% fit yet, blah, blah, blah. All the things we mentioned in the first half, I think those played a part. So I'm not too concerned. Ryan McCann said, do you think the state of the pitch on Saturday contributed to Timber's injury? I don't know about that, but he said it's a disgrace for the pitch to be in that condition for the first game of the season. And Andrew Allen mentioned this to me as well. I don't know if you noticed, but apparently the pitch was not great.
Interesting. I didn't notice that. I don't have the best view of that.
You're sort of more pitch level, aren't you?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Yeah. So I don't really get as good a read of that. But yeah, that's really interesting. Don't know about the quality of the pitch, but it would be a surprise and a shame because it's historically obviously been one of the best surfaces in the Premier League. Maybe I know nothing about grass or groundskeeping, but maybe it is sort of time to kind of grow into the season. Maybe it isn't at its best at the kickoff.
Yeah, I mean, Arteta said, we wanted a high rhythm game today because we knew the pitch was going to get dry and it was really hot and it's going to be slower. So I don't know if they had some concerns about the pitch themselves. Maybe we just need new carpet.
Maybe. It's as simple as that.
Yes.
I've kind of done mine, to be honest.
You're out, are you?
I'm out. They're all just about, is it sad about Jurrien Timber?
Yeah.
Yes, it's sad.
It's very sad. I've got a couple.
Go on.
Stephen Di Maria says, in all seriousness, how the fuck can Chelsea spend £900 million in 3 windows?
I don't know. To be fair, fuck being fair, actually. I was going to say they have brought in a lot more money than clubs typically bring in.
Mm-hmm. Selling a few players to the Saudi League, yeah.
Here and there.
Mm-hmm. One to us, of course.
They've done their trick of putting people on 11-year contracts and amortising fees across that.
No, you can't do that anymore. It's maximum 5 years now.
Unless you're Moises Caicedo, seemingly.
No. You can still get the long contract, but you can only do the amortization thing over 5 years.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
This is, I mean, look, we're all finance experts and medical experts these days, all football fans, But the long contracts are mad. Caicedo's getting 8+1.
I mean, the sort of gossip in football at the time was that when Todd Bowley came in, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn saying this, but a lot of people looked at it and sort of thought, maybe they think they've got a transfer ban coming for something. Because the way they were just sort of collecting players was, never seen before. The rate of it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But
there was some story last week about historical inaccuracies in some of the reporting and offshore fucking doodads and what's it?
I think it was linked to with the Abramovich era.
Yes, but it may still have repercussions for them now.
So maybe, they're mindful of that and they're thinking, let's do as much business as we possibly can. But a couple of windows have gone by and FIFA ain't doing nothing, UEFA aren't doing anything. Chelsea are still out there buying up players.
What do you make of the Caicedo thing and the way it played out this week? Because, I'm reminded of the video that you did earlier in the summer where you talked about transfers, how they happen, contact with players. It's tapping up and all the rest of it. But, you don't make a bid until you know the player is going to join. Basically that was, part of the process that you laid out.
In most cases, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, how to deliver, it's fine maybe putting in a surprise bid for a 20, 30 million pound player, but how did Liverpool make a 110 million pound bid that is then accepted and not be 100% sure that the player is going to join the club? I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? And they've fucked the Lavia thing now up as well.
I think they're having a nightmare, and let me tell you, they look like a team in desperate need of a defensive midfielder from what I saw of them against Chelsea. But
Kieran Tierney can play defensive midfield.
Nicola Pepe can play defensive midfield. That's what we've got him training to do. He's on an island with Gilberto Silva. And we're going to try and train him up as something else and sell him on. I think what must have happened there is that Liverpool were quite late to the Caicedo thing. Chelsea have been in talks for ages. Sometimes you do make a bid for a player and he doesn't come or he doesn't want to join. Ask Man City about bidding for Declan Rice. I think Caicedo's position was, if Chelsea can't do a deal with Brighton, then yes, right, I will happily join Liverpool. But I guess Chelsea, in the background the whole time, have been giving him the assurances, don't worry, we will eventually get a deal done with Brighton. So when Brighton agreed a fee with Liverpool, he didn't jump at the chance to go and do a medical with Liverpool because he still had Chelsea on the phone saying, hang in there, hang in there, hang in there. Todd's coming.
Uncle Todd and his big bag of fucking dollars. I mean, they started, what did they start bidding like at 60 million for Caicedo?
In January,
you know, and now are Brighton fucking brilliant or Chelsea just dumb as a box of rocks?
I don't know. I mean, we knew inflation was bad. We didn't know it was that bad.
Fucking hell. Hell.
They've got a good player, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, they do, but, you know.
I just can't believe what the going rate is these days for a decent defensive midfielder. I mean, we know about that ourselves, but, oh man, at least we could say English tax, you know?
Sure. It's
the famous Ecuadorian tax coming into play again.
Yeah, that's the bane of the Premier League. Final one from the 11th, Gabby says, how great was it to see Harry Kane realise he can't argue with the ref in German?
By the way, I've not been on since Harry's departure. And may I just say how delighted I am that he's gone. How happy I am about how sad Spurs fans are. And how much I hope he never comes back.
Not even on holidays.
No, the borders are shut. You know, that's a couple of penalties per season we won't be conceding.
Unless, of course,
Aaron Ramsdale's the most relieved man in England.
In the Champions League.
The Champions League, of course. Oh my God, Andrew.
Sorry.
I hadn't thought through the permutations.
Yeah. Are your Spurs friends absolutely fuming?
I think they're just sad.
That's better, isn't it?
You know.
That is better.
Well, I did think during the Brentford game, you know, they had the issue, the delayed kickoff, no running water. I thought just show all the Spurs fans a montage of Harry Kane goals.
Hang on,
You'd
what?
be flooded in tears.
Oh, what did
you
I
don't know
miss?
about this?
No.
The Brentford Spurs game was delayed. Their players were on the pitch about to take kickoff.
Right.
And the referee had to go and explain to the managers, we can't start the game because there's no running water and it's a sanitary issue. So say what you like about Arsenal's e-ticketing system. Well, let me tell you, when I went in that stadium, water everywhere.
Flush the bogs, no problem.
You could flush the bogs, turn on the taps. The urinals did that thing where they come on automatically every now and again. Listen, we're a serious club.
All right.
Thanks, Uncle Stan, for keeping the taps on.
Keeping the water pumping. All right. We had better leave it there. Like I said to you, we'll make the Patreon podcast available to you free of charge, free to air. It's in the show notes. Do click away and have a listen to that after you finish this, of course, as ever. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. It'll be a Tuesday Arsecast Extra next week because we're not playing until Monday.
Yep.
Fucking second week of the season and we've got an Arsenal free weekend.
Time to get Timber on that rehab, see if we can turn him round for Palace away.
Nice and quick.
Got a couple of extra days.
Nice and quick. All right. Thank you, folks. We will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.